This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
So there actually are three big summits. Well, big aspirationally. Whether they turn out to be big or not remains to be seen. But there are three important meetings this year to try to set a new agenda of sustainable development in the global context. And at the core of them is a meeting in September 25th to 27th, in which the world's heads of state and government, probably the largest assemblage of heads of state and government in history, I would guess 170 or more leaders, will assemble at UN headquarters on the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, actually, which this year is, to adopt sustainable development goals. And this process has now been a process of negotiation over the last 2.5 years. It is not easy to negotiate, by the way, with 193 governments, and we're not done yet, but I'm sure that every hour, minute, and second will be used well until that final moment to reach an agreement on a global framework of sustainable development. And these will be adopted on September 25th, which will be a very interesting day, actually. The General Assembly will have almost all of the world's leaders there, and the opening speech will be Pope Francis, which will be quite interesting, speaking to the assembled leaders about their moral responsibility to each other and to future generations. So I think it's going to be quite a notable moment in our modern history. That meeting is going to be bracketed by two other summits. The one that you've probably heard most about will happen about 6 weeks later in Paris. That will be the 21st attempt to implement the climate treaty. So in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, we adopted the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and that went into force in 1994. And the first meeting of the parties to that convention, the Conference of the Parties #1, COP1, was in Berlin in 1995. So now we're entering COP21 in Paris in December of this year. This is the 21st attempt to reach an operational agreement on how to do what the world agreed to do back in 1992, and that is to stabilize greenhouse gases in order to avoid dangerous anthropogenic interference in the climate system. So the UNFCCC, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, is quite a nice treaty, actually. When you read it, it's quite sensible, and it says the right things. And it says that rising greenhouse gas concentrations are threatening human instability through anthropogenic climate change. And we need to stabilize the concentrations of greenhouse gases. And we've been trying to do that for 20 years now. And all eyes are on Paris this year as a special moment, actually. And I would say, not only to be hyperbolic about it or histrionic about it, I'd say it's our last chance to do what governments said they intend to do, which is to avoid warming above 2 degrees Celsius. That was a standard that was based on the advice of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that was adopted at COP15, which was the meeting in Copenhagen in 2009. And interestingly, in 2009, all eyes were on Copenhagen, like will, I hope, occur in Paris. But of course, the Copenhagen summit, which had huge expectations, failed. because, strangely enough, there was no good reason for those huge expectations. Everybody just assumed that since President Obama was now the President of the United States and George W. Bush was gone, that something good was going to happen on climate change, good in the terms of reaching an agreement. And when the parties got there, they didn't agree. There was a famous picture in the last minute of all these heads of state huddled over a table trying to agree, and basically the meeting broke up. And in the wisdom of the international system, they said, my God, we failed to reach an agreement. This is an utter global emergency. So we absolutely promise we'll reach an agreement in 6 years. That's what they said. In fact, they said we will reach an agreement in 2015 that will go into force in 2018 to begin implementation in 2020. That's the path that we're on right now. So the goal is to reach an agreement that really begins operationally January 1, 2020, maybe with a few measures beforehand. This is tough, and I'll describe in a few minutes some of the reasons why, in my experience and in my opinion, it's the hardest issue that humanity has ever grappled with. Not because it's intrinsically unsolvable, but because it's global and long-term and filled with science and scientific uncertainty and vastly different costs and benefits across the world and a lot of misunderstanding. And so it's not easy to get a global consensus. But you can see if we fail now and say we're really going to do it in 2022, to go into force by 2025, actually quantitatively we blow the 2 degrees C limit with any chance at all. Many people say it's already gone. It's close call, but in any event, we're up against the wall. Now, before the September meeting is a third summit, and that is on financing for sustainable development. The idea is that we need, in order to achieve goals of sustainable development, we need financial system change for a couple of reasons, 2 huge reasons. One is that the current financial system obviously finances a lot of unsustainable investments. In fact, it's very good at that. We have a kind of economic juggernaut which does not satisfy the criteria of sustainable development, that is well financed internationally. And part of the challenge is what kinds of financial system regulatory changes could push the allocation of world savings in a sustainable direction. The second sense of this meeting in July, which will take place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, also at the summit level, is to finance the challenges faced by the world's poorest countries. Because on almost any accounting, if you do the accounting properly, the poorest countries cannot achieve sustainable development in the sense that we're talking about of ending poverty, achieving social inclusion, achieving access to health and education and other critical needs, and moving to safe, sustainable infrastructure. They can't do it on their own, and they can't do it through private financing alone. And so one needs a system of state-to-state financing to help implement that. Well, if there's anything less popular in the world than foreign assistance, I haven't found it yet. This is not, especially in our country, where this is among the least popular things to do. And therefore, this July summit, which is just basically weeks away, is still hugely uncertain in what it can actually accomplish.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.